Welcome to the Building with Metal podcast, presented by McElroy Metal. Whether you're a contractor, architect, designer, or building owner, we're here to help you build better with metal roofing and siding products.
Barndominiums are exploding right now, but a lot of people get them wrong. So Blair, what's the biggest misconception you see when people start on a barndominium project?
The biggest one, I would say, is that they think it's going to be simple. I think they hear the word barn and don't go the rest of the way to dominium, which means to live in, right? And they think, I'm going to build a barn and I'm going to call up someone and do it tomorrow, and it's going to be very easy and it's going to cost very little. You're building a house. So that's probably where I'd go.
That's a great way to think of it. Okay, so speaking of building a house, I think this will be fun. So $1,000,000 question, you do these for customers all the time. Mm-hmm. But let's say you were starting one for you and your family tomorrow. What would you do differently than most of your customers do?
This is not a knock on our customers. We love our customers. But I think what I would do differently is I would call a designer first versus a builder. So much of a barndominium is crafted around the design, and obviously design is crafted around use, and not only current use but future use. And designers, they're not all one and the same, so you got to pick well, but designers can really bring that out well. A builder wants to build something. They're not often as good as a designer on conceptualizing. Obviously FBI does a pretty good job. Don't want to knock us on that front, but I would start with a designer versus starting with a builder is maybe what I'd say.
Interesting. All right. I think that's already a good soundbite and a takeaway for our listeners. So with that said, welcome back to Building with Metal. Today, we're talking all things barndominium, which is a super hot topic right now. And we're thrilled to have Blair Neihouser, Vice President of Sales with FBI Buildings, join the show. He's going to walk us through what's real, what's hype, and what you really need to know before you start on a barndominium project. Welcome to the show, Blair.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Kathi. Appreciate being here.
Before we dig in, though, maybe let's take a step back. So when we say the word barndominium, what are we really talking about?
Oh, I love this question because it's all over the place, right? I mean, you Google it, you see what AI has to say, and everybody can kind of have their own definition. I think some people think it's a house that kind of resembles a barn, and that just may mean it's got certain features on it that might be used on barns, like steel siding or steel roofing or materials or products that are in common. Where it started was people were building good sized pole barns, right, for their shop or for ag use or for something large storage related, and then the thought popped into people's brain of, well, this is a big structure, maybe I could just live in here too, right? And so that
makes a short walk over.
That's right. I'll walk right out the door into my workshop and right back in. Hopefully I can keep the dust out. I think that's where the concept started. But it's actually a great question that we ask our customers initially, like what drew them to a barndominium? How did they land at talking to us? I think in its truest sense, a barndominium is intended to be your home. And it just so happens that home is either built out of things that are maybe normally ways that you build a barn, or it may not be. And so what I mean by that is you could get a barndominium floor plan out there in the ether of the internet, but it's actually designed for stud frame construction rather than post frame construction, which is what most barns are built out of. But it's been lumped into this barndominium term primarily because of its exterior design. But it's not actually suited to be built well as post frame.
That's a really interesting differentiation. If we can, I'm kind of a squirrel, but let's go down that path. Yeah. So in case our listeners aren't familiar, Blair, what's the difference between post frame construction and what you call stick built?
So if I start with post frame, if you've ever been onto a farm or seen a garage, the most notable difference you'd see in a post frame building, you're going to have larger column members and your larger truss members, your structural components. They're going to be spaced out further. You're going to have normally 8 foot. In our world, it's 8 foot on center, columns and trusses, which is the main structure of the building. And then you're going to have some horizontal framing and some steel cladding and things on the outside. And so that's what we call post frame. It goes all the way back to the literal poles, right? You may know it as a pole barn, right? You use telephone poles to build these bigger structures. And so that's what post frame is. And so what's different than that is stick built or stud frame. And so where you're going to have your wall is going to have vertical members every 16 inches, right? If you think about a stud wall or a stud frame house, your framing is typically 16 inches on center, and that's how you construct a stud wall or a stick-built wall. And then similarly, your trusses are built out of much smaller members because they're also much more, sometimes 16 inches or 2 foot on center to make up your roof. So it's very different material use. Normally 2x4s, in the stick-built world, you're going to generally be 2x6s, 2x8s, 2x10s, 2x12s in the post-frame world because of the difference in the dimensions and how those structures are designed.
So one of the biggest questions, I don't know about you guys, but one of the biggest questions we get is, Barndominium obviously is a term that's really gotten popular. And to your point there, FBI does a lot of barndominiums. There are other companies that do nothing but barndominiums, right? It's really become this huge market niche.
Yep.
But another term we hear is shouse. So what is the difference, or is there a difference between barndominium and a shouse?
You could maybe argue we're splitting hairs, but I do think there is a difference. When people use the term barndominium, I think the general consensus is that this is going to be your primary residence, right? This is going to be where you live. A shouse would likely be, there's probably a couple ways you could describe it. The best way I describe it is where the majority of the building, or maybe the majority of the square footage or of the structure itself, is for use beyond your residence. So if I just use an example, let's say I want a big shop. It's going to be a 60 by 120 because I've got a camper and I've got a wood shop. I got a lot of things in my shop space. And then my home space is 1,200 square feet down towards the one end. And maybe I live there full time, or maybe it's, it's a place my family stays when they come into town. It's a living space, but maybe isn't my primary residence. It can be at times, but that's maybe the biggest distinction, is that the majority of the structure is for something other than living. And you have some living in it, but it's a shop house, not a house that might have a little bit of because a lot of barndominiums actually have what I would call an oversized garage, because it works with the structure, and it actually normally works with the lifestyle of people that want to do barndominiums. But a shouse, in my opinion, is a majority shop that's also got some house stuff in it. Hopefully that distinction makes sense. Like I said, somebody might say you're splitting hairs. It doesn't matter, but I think there's an even one that it does make sense to use them.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the other thing we see, and I'm curious from you guys' experience, obviously there's going to be differences in finishes in any construction project, right?
Even if you just start with the outside, in the shouse side of things, because the majority of that structure is shop, you might have a few upgrades, right? You might introduce some heavy timber elements. You might introduce some brick or masonry. You may be down low on your wainscot section, replace some steel with some different materials, but not as much. It's going to be a smaller portion of the exterior. The rest is going to be normal post-frame, steel, McElroy's wonderful steel.
Thanks for that plug, by the way.
Yeah. In a barndominium space, you might have more of those elements there from the exterior side. You might have more, maybe not even steel siding. They might do board and batten or wood siding in some fashion. I know McElroy's actually got some products that fit in that category. So I think even exterior-wise, you're going to see different decisions be made. And then the inside is we see it both ways. It's really going to be up to the person. Do they want the granite or the quartz or the formica or the slate or the luxury vinyl, fake wood floor? Those decisions inside can go, you name it, in the amount of directions. I don't know if I could confidently say that inside shouses versus barndos are going to have widely varying decisions, because that's very much going to be personal preference. We definitely see the spectrum. Exterior, you do see a little bit more basic to custom, if that's a fair way to say it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I think you bring up an interesting point, personal preference. So let's talk about that a minute. When you talk to prospects and clients that are considering barndominiums, are you able to kind of get a sense of really what type of person that this construction approach fits and what the goals are for somebody that it works well for?
That's a great point. And this kind of goes back to the teaser thing that you led with. A barndominium can work. If I had to put a perfect customer for a barndominium, it would be someone who has a bit of a DIY bent. And I don't want to, like, for all the listeners out there, like, the Barndominiums are not only for DIYers. Right? I feel like anymore these days, you got to caveat, big statements. But if I had to put someone that is really, this really works well for and can take advantage of some of the benefits of how you construct them and just some of the different ways to even save money, it's a great customer profile because they can reduce their cost by doing some things themselves. One of the benefits of post frame or a post frame Barndominium, different than a stud frame one, is you can get the full outside done and you've done nothing to the inside yet because your interior walls aren't structural. You don't have to do any of that, and you can now do that at your own timeline. Whereas with stick built, you have some things that have to happen in some certain sequences to get that thing dried in and fully enclosed.
That's a great point that you could do a phased effort. I never thought about that.
That's what a lot of people do. Like, hey, I just need you to get the shell done because I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and that's going to take me so much time because I'm going to do it on the weekends or whatever. But we do have some people that they're approaching this like a house and they need kind of a home builder. That's fine too. It's not that a barndo isn't right for them. Now we just need to think consciously about who's going to do what. Who's going to wear what hat in terms of general contracting this project? Do you want the post frame builder to general contract it? Do they have the capability? Is there a residential contractor that might be a great partner to bring into this mix and work with the customer, the post frame builder, and then that general contractor to help with all the home finish type stuff? Because not all post frame builders grew up in their experience as a business, understanding flooring and base trim and paint colors and drywall and backsplashes and all that stuff. Home builders know that well.
I was just going to ask about, you mentioned drywall. And so in case a listener hasn't really dug deep yet, total off the cuff, would you say what percentage of Barndominium interior walls are metal versus drywall, etc.?
I would say it probably started more with being more utility, where you would see more steel on the living part or living portion of the building. I would say now in the living portion, you're seeing a lot of drywall because we as builders have matured in our way to prep for different finishes beyond just steel, and how the framing spacings and how we prep for some of that is we've gotten a little bit more sophisticated to be able to prep for some of that stuff. So you don't see it as much now in the living side. You still see it a ton in the shop or the garage side. It's a great economical finish there.
Okay, so you've talked about stick build or stud frame versus post frame construction. Why does post frame construction lend itself so well to Barndominiums?
There's a couple things that are really advantageous for a home, right? We're talking Barndominiums, but it's really a home that post frame is actually really good for. The first one is post frame is great at creating a ton of flexibility for how you want to design your house. So I said this a little bit earlier on, but your interior walls are not needed for the structural stability of a post frame building. And so you can put walls wherever, right? And that's it's a big deal when you go to renovate or, make changes to your stick built home. You got to understand, is this a load bearing wall or not? That's not the case in a post frame building. And so it lends itself well to Barndominiums because you can design a basic or a simple outside structure and you can go to town with how you do that inside.
And you could also have incredibly wide open spaces, correct? Yeah,
you can have massively high ceiling. You can create very dynamic spaces. I'm no architect, but you can have vaulted great rooms and just things that feel one way.
Yeah, I mean, we have on our website, we actually have in our photo gallery a Barndominium filter. And, if any of the listeners want to go on, we have some, but I think that might have been one of you guys' project actually with basketball courts on the inside. And, those kinds of things are not unusual in a Barndominium.
Yeah, I think you bring up something very, very good there is those two concepts of an open design for your home space, but also that translates into being a good structure for, but I'll just call it recreation space. You just mentioned a basketball court. Well, Barndominium that's built post frame, right, by a post frame builder, you can transition from the house part of the structure to the shop or recreation or garage part of the structure, and it doesn't look odd. Whereas stick built, that's going to be a little bit trickier to do into transitioning into this bigger expanse of a space for volleyball or basketball or big toys or whatever it may be. So there's a lot of design flexibility, I think, is the umbrella benefit there.
Obviously, we talked earlier, they're the hot commodity. I mean, I know even from our website inquiries and chats and builders and whatnot that, it's, and it's not fading. I mean, what are we on? Probably year 10 maybe of the Barndominium phase?
Yeah, that feels right. Yeah, and to your point, it's growing, right? It's
for sure.
The internet has made it the thing to look for, and as I said earlier, make it seem very easy.
Yeah, that's probably a really good point. So why, if you had to put your finger on the pulse of a few things that you find, Blair, why are they so popular? What do they do well? Yeah. We talked about open floor plans and open spaces. Anything else? Yeah,
I think there's some other minor things, and then I'll maybe say a bigger one that's really my conjecture. I don't know if this is true or not, but the other minor things would be, and things we've talked about for a long time, but like just take your guys' product of your McElroy steel. Barndominiums generally are going to be built out of materials they're going to have less maintenance than a normal stick frame house, right? Your steel lasts so long, and the warranties and the paint structure and all that stuff, it just creates a pretty maintenance-free thing. And I think people want that. People don't want to have to worry about, am I going to have to do X, Y, or Z to my home over the next few years? They'd like to set it and forget it as much as possible. That's one. I think you get a lot of insulation value. A post frame wall the wall cavity is thicker than a stud frame wall, and so you get more insulation, and so you can make them very, in how environmentally conscious we are about how do we heat and cool and set up our structures. Post frame works very well for that thought. What about cost compared to traditional? Oh man, you had to go there, Kathi. You had to go there.
Well, the listeners are going to ask, and it's okay if you say that, it depends on the project, but we've got to talk about it.
I can say that. That's my normal sales answer. It just depends.
You can say it. That's fine.
It very much does. But this is probably, I could have maybe lumped this into the teaser of a big misconception. That is for sure a very pervasive thought that a post frame Barndominium or just a post frame house is going to be, let's throw something crazy out there, half the cost of a normal house. That's not going to happen purely based on the fact that is it stick built versus post frame built. You still have, if we just think about it, this is going to get weirdly technical, but in stick built, you have 2 2x4s every 16 inches. And in a post frame building, you have 3 2x6s laminated together to make your column every 8 feet. And you have some horizontal framing between there. So your amount of lumber, if you just looked at it from a size of lumber and saturation of lumber, it's not going to make up that such that your cost is half. It's just not. And so what we see often is that if you take this house in a similar design and you would price it out stick built versus post frame, you're going to be in a very similar spot. There's really no data out there that says this is going to be massively cheaper. And again, this is probably, I hope you get tons of comments on this. Yeah, just drives engagement. But there's deep-seated opinions about this that it should be way less expensive. And I think there's a way. So I'll caveat my first statement to say there's really no cost advantage between the two styles of building a home. But back to what I said about a DIY person being kind of perfect for a Barndominium, that is the way to get what might be a $500,000 house for a $300,000 actual investment, because you took on hanging the drywall, running the wiring, laying the flooring, pouring the concrete. You've got those capabilities. You don't have to pay someone to do it, right? You're trading your time for paying someone else's labor. So there is a way, but it normally comes a lot through the DIY path.
So as far as a lifestyle for the typical Barndominium prospect, I guess, if you will, are they in rural areas? Are they in suburban areas? Are they in, metro areas? The lion's share is going to be rural. I mean, it normally lends itself to, as I said a lot, is that even when it's your primary residence and it's a true Barndominium, typically there's an oversized garage a bit because people have toys. And so we do see them in some suburban areas. I can't say I've seen a lot. I've talked to some different general contractors about some of these concepts, but I can't say I've seen a lot of a subdivision development where they're all kind of Barndominiums. I haven't seen that as much. The most typical you're going to see is on a couple acres and,
it's a bit more of a rural setting. That to me is I said this a little bit earlier. There's some of those kind of building specific benefits to what's driving some of this trend of barndominiums. But this is really what you asked about speaks to what I think is the bigger reason. It's the demarcator of time that we all have of our lives now, which is COVID. Is I think we've just seen it's been an exponentiated shift post COVID in the last 4 or 5 years, where people are wanting to invest in the lifestyle they want. They want to invest in, if they want to have some toys, if they want to have some space. I think that the vast majority of population's mindset shifted a bit on, where do I want to live? What do I want my day-to-day to look like? And what sort of setting makes that all possible? And a barndominium fits as a square peg in a square hole very well for that thought.
And one of the other things, again, to your point about COVID, right? People came out of there with a desire to spend more time with family. And so barndominiums and friends, barndominiums lead themselves well to many event spaces, right? You mentioned a couple extra bedrooms, big spaces to throw a party or a cookout or, those kinds of things. And I think you're right. I hadn't really thought about the tide of COVID, but that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So
I don't think it was generated from COVID. I just think that event made us think different. When we start thinking different, we spend money different.
I mean, that event changed everything for everybody in our world, for sure. So, all right. Well, I tell you what, for our listeners, I'm going to tell you, you're going to have to join us next time. Blair and I have got so much to talk about. We still have to talk about disadvantages, design mistakes, and a few things that FBI does special that could help somebody with a barndominium. So do us a favor, tune in next time. We'll pick back up on this conversation with Blair from FBI Buildings. Thanks for joining us, Blair.
Thanks, Kathi.
Thanks for listening to the Building with Metal podcast, presented by McElroy Metal. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us online at www.mcelroymetal.com for more info and products. Until next time, keep building with metal.